Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our workforce webinar series on today, Tuesday, November 7th. For those tuning in today, it is election day, so make sure you get out to the polls. For those tuning in later, we're so happy we're able to find this, and I hope that it is useful for you. Today, we're going to be talking about the Clean Slate Act. Clean Slate Act was a recent public policy proposal that was passed. And the purpose of our workforce webinar series is to have panelists come in and speak about recent public policy and workforce trends that could impact businesses. And the Clean Slate Act could and should help create new pathways for the worker shortage to hopefully go down. So today we have three panelists. We have Dara Strickland. She's the head of human resources at Repowered, a St. Paul social enterprise that is both one of Minnesota's largest e-waste and recycling job skills facilities, and it helps people facing barriers to employment due to histories of incarceration. In addition to her facility with recruitment and training, Dara brings her past experience as an attorney to helping Repowered's employees find the best way forward from re-entry to meaningful work with a family-sustaining wage. We also have Marcel Hofker. Marcel is the founder of Strive Staffing, a second chance staffing company that is changing the face of temporary staffing. Marcel himself is just as impacted, having been previously incarcerated after 20 plus years of addiction and criminality. Today, Marcel brings his perspective and experience in this employment field to help companies move into this space smoothly through discussion and coaching. Marcel believes that opportunity should be inclusive and works toward opening more doors to employment for those that are just as impacted. And finally, we have Mark Hayes. Mark is an assistant Ramsey County attorney, and as an executive officer to the county attorney, leads strategic initiative implementation and represents and advises the county attorney on a wide range of matters. In prior leadership roles, he served as Minnesota's ombudsperson for corrections, provided multiple organizations with policy research, development, and lobbying services through his consulting firm, was vice president of the Council on Crime and Justice, co-founded the Minnesota Second Chance Coalition, and was founding executive director of the Minnesota Research Justice Center, where he currently serves on the board of directors. Mark received his BA from the University of Minnesota and his JD from the University of St. Thomas, and is a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard and Army Reserve. We're so happy to have these wonderful panelists here with us today. And I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and give sort of a reason as to why you felt joining the call today was important. And Dara, we're going to start with you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here. I will speak at length unless cut off about how passionate I am about fair chance employment. But I think we want to start with hearing a little bit more about what this step is, which is a first step with Clean Slate. And Hannah, was there something really in particular you wanted me to address for Clean Slate as it applies to my workers or my work?
No, I just wanted to sort of have you explain sort of what brought you to this call today and why did you feel this was important?
Sure. It's important because I am first and foremost somebody who thinks about workers and worker equity, their ability to access meaningful jobs that are going to support them and support their families. But I'm also an employer. I'm the person who recruits and hires and finds the right people for not only for us, but for our employment partners that our successful graduates of our program get placed with. And one of the biggest concerns that I hear from them and from industry in general is that we have so many spaces that need skilled workers, and we don't know where the workers are going to come from, either today or in the future. And I have an answer for them. I know exactly where those workers are and where they're getting their skills and where they're going to come from. But there is a barrier in talking to employers about seeking out people with backgrounds, experience with incarceration or with the criminal legal system. So that's what brings me here today, is it's giving more information to the people who are making hiring and policy decisions about this fantastic, little known, untapped resource, which is people who have a history of incarceration and the amazing workers that are waiting for amazing jobs.
Awesome. Thank you, Dara. Marcel, could you just introduce yourself and speak to a little bit about why you're here today?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So what really brought me to the table today is the fact that this bill in the last year gained teeth. It became something very useful to the population that I meet on a regular basis. As a second chance employer, our primary purpose is to bring these new employment opportunities to people with criminal histories. And one story that I hear a lot is, people that have charges 10, 12 years in the past, and, they'll get a job, they'll work really well, they'll work their way up to being offered managerial positions, they run a background check and they get fired because of something they had a decade ago. This will automate those issues. As somebody that's a holder of one of these records myself, it's a daunting idea to go through the expungement process. It costs money, it costs time, and really it's difficult. You have to be in a certain position to really make it work for you. This will automate that and take that off of somebody's plate as they go into the future. And as an employer, it really makes it to where my due diligence is satisfied. That person's record's clear, and as I work with other employers through staffing, this will be a big plus to them, and it'll open up doors to candidates that they haven't been looking at in the first place.
Great, thank you. Mark, last we're going to have you introduce yourself, and then if you could go into just sort of a 10 to 15-minute overview of the Clean Slate Act itself and the legislation.
All right, thanks, Hannah. Sounds good. I'm Mark Hazy, and I guess I'm here because a couple decades ago I got really mad about things that our government was doing, supposedly in our name when it comes to the criminal justice system, and really treating people unfairly. And when I took a job after law school, a big part of my job was educating employers about how and why to hire people with criminal records, and working on policies with the legislature that make it easier for somebody with a criminal record to get employment and housing and seek other opportunities. And just the way that we as a society and many of our systems treat people who have made a mistake and then are trying to do what we want them to do and support themselves and their family are just really in some ways ridiculous and incredibly disheartening, and really need to be changed. And that's why I really appreciate the Minneapolis Greater Minneapolis Chamber for supporting this work. The Minnesota Chamber has supported other reforms I've worked on over the years. It's really important that employers and businesses get on board with this. And it also, as we'll hear from others, it really doesn't just help the people being hired looking for another chance, but it helps the employers. So on the law, I'm going to give a little bit of just background and history, because I think not that you're that interested in probably the history, but I think it helps understand this new law a little better. So first of all, an expungement is a sealing of government records. Those records, in some cases, can be open for certain purposes. It doesn't destroy them, but it seals them from view for most purposes. And it's just of the government record. So it does not impact things that might be out there on the internet. It doesn't directly impact the data harvesters that collect those government records and then sell them to you, the employer, to use in background checks. However, there is a law that requires those data collectors to update their records periodically, so those should reflect the current record, the current government record. A little bit of the history of expungement in Minnesota. About 15 years ago, some called expungement sort of the Wild West because judges had a ton of discretion. The way the law worked, judges, they just had to use this balancing test of the burden on the petitioner against public safety concerns, basically. And they had discretion to decide if a record should be expunged or not. And that included the executive branch BCA records, the court records, prosecutor records, law enforcement records. Well, in 2010, the Minnesota Supreme Court issued an opinion that said that the courts, because of the separation of powers, did not have the authority to seal executive branch records. So they could seal they had inherent authority to seal the court record, but they couldn't seal, for example, the BCA record or the law enforcement record, which you can access either directly in some ways or through a data collector that sells those to you. So it basically, that ruling sort of eviscerated the expungement remedy in Minnesota. And so, excuse me, in 2013, a statute was passed that allowed certain, the courts to expunge certain records, a list of about 50 felonies, some misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, and diversion cases, arrest records, at both, it allowed the court to expunge those, seal them at the courts and at the executive branch. But in order to do that, somebody had to file a petition with the court, which is a pretty complicated process. Hiring a private attorney to help you do it would cost several $1,000s. There's all these things around serving the different records holding agencies that make it very complicated. So, and all the other hurdles that people have just accessing the legal system made it very difficult still to get an expungement. Some research in Michigan that had a similar expungement statute showed that only about 6.5 or 6 to 7% of the people eligible for an expungement actually ever applied for one. There was a part of that 2013 law that allowed for a prosecutor to initiate an expungement on behalf of somebody, so they didn't have to file a petition. And here in Ramsey County, the Ramsey County Attorney's Office and Hennepin County Attorney's Office does this also, working with the Attorney General and some other county attorneys, developed a program where here we have a staff person who, if for certain records, will help somebody with the petition. But now we arrive to current day in this legislation that passed this last session. And as you heard, and as I think you've heard, that the new legislation is going to automate this process. And so I want to get into a little bit of specifics without going too deep into detail, because we don't have time, and I don't know if that's necessarily what's most helpful for you, but I'll give the basics of the new law. And I don't know, Hannah, were you going to share that 2-page handout I sent?
Yes, Maddie will be sharing that with our attendees today, and then we'll also make sure that for those watching this at a later time, it will be embedded in our YouTube as well.
Great, thank you. So what this new law does is, for those offenses that were eligible in the prior expungement statute and a couple others, after a certain period of time passes, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension will automatically seal that record in their records, and they'll send a notice to the courts to seal them. They'll send a notice to law enforcement to not release them. So it's going to be an expungement automated. The BCA will go through all the records that exist and make this happen. It won't go into effect until 2025, primarily because the BCA the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has to set up the system for making this happen. And the records that this will apply to are anything that's been, when somebody's been arrested but not charged, or charged and that's dismissed, That will happen without a waiting period. A few diversion type things will also get dismissed without a waiting period. Most diversion programs will get expunged with a year waiting period from the completion of the program. Petty misdemeanors have a waiting period of 2 years when those will be expunged. Misdemeanors exclude some things like domestic assault, violation of an order of protection, and a number of other things. So those won't be included, but others will be expunged after 2 years after the discharge of sentence. Gross misdemeanors, which also have a number of exceptions. Others will be expunged after 3 years from discharge of sentence. And then there's a list of, I think it's 52 felonies that will be eligible for expungement 5 years after discharge from sentence. So somebody with, some felonies can avail themselves of this, but it's going to take 5 years plus whatever sentence they had, which could be, 1 to maybe 5 years. That could be on probation. So that's a significant period of time. And also something to know is there are about 350 felony offenses in Minnesota statutes, and this covers about 52 of them. Some other things the statute does is it expands what's eligible. So there's still some benefit of people of doing an expungement through a petition. For example, this new automatic expungement does not apply to Department of Human Services background studies, which somebody has to go through to work at a job where they're working with children or vulnerable adults. This doesn't apply to them, but somebody could petition to have a judge order those records sealed at the Department of Human Services and get over that barrier. There are also some offenses that somebody could potentially apply for petition expungement a little bit earlier as well. One other important thing for you all to know is that this also amended an existing employer liability protection statute. That's Minnesota Statute 181.981. And if you don't know about that, you should. What that does is it protects an employer from having evidence of the criminal record admitted in any kind of civil liability lawsuit. And that has always, since it was written in 2013, I actually worked with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce attorney on writing that statute back then. I'm sorry, it was originally written in 2009. It, like I said, doesn't allow evidence entered of just an arrest. It doesn't allow evidence entered of something that's been expunged. And what we amended this statute for that is to make sure that it included these automatic expungements. So if somebody gets an automatic expungement, evidence of that can't be used in a lawsuit against an employer. One thing I want to say about that is even without those protections, if somebody doesn't have an expungement or they did have a conviction, the liability for employers is very narrow under liability law for hiring. So that what the courts have said is, it's only if an employer were to hire somebody in a job where they have like additional access to people's homes, like their apartment caretaker, or they're going inside of people's homes and they have some kind of violent offense. Like the courts really wanted to keep that narrow, and so there isn't really much liability there, but the expungement inclusion increases that protection. And then, I think I already mentioned the requirement of background check companies to update their records. So that's the new statute. If folks have questions about the statute, I'm happy to answer those, but I think that's all I have for the overview. And I think we'll just, I'm happy to weigh in on the statute and civil liability and some of those other issues as we have a discussion too.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Marcel, would you mind speaking about your past experience and how that helped you sort of develop your professional career? Oh, Marcel, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I went since the age of 16. I went through, like almost 24 years of you know, class 5 drug addiction and criminality. Not a problemed user, but everything I did was in that world. And once you start piling on some charges, things get more and more difficult. You go in for a job, and they look at your background, and you just start collecting rejections. I think that's where a lot of people fall off. If I'm just going to keep getting rejected, then I'm going to, F it, I'm just going to go back to what I do. It culminated in at 38, so 2015 or 13, I got raided for the first time directly. It had been in multiple raids for other people, but never for myself. And this was my first full felony. I had, gotten diversion for an auto theft back when I was in my 20s, and that came off my record. But this was my chance to go to prison, and I made the best of prison. Not everybody has the experience I had. I got to go into the CIP, Challenge Incarceration Program, and that really challenged me to think differently and actually just react to how I think differently. It really taught me a lot more about accountability. And then I had the foresight to come out and reskill myself. I had the opportunities to come out and reskill myself. I went to one of these free trade schools that are in the city here, and I was able to become an electrician in 20 weeks. And just the confidence that gave me, all right, because I feel like there's a lack of confidence in a lot of people thinking, well, I've always done this, I don't know if I can do that, and I think that building that confidence really made a big difference and has led to so many other things. Now, I'm no longer an electrician full-time, but that was a big step for me, just to reskill and kind of open my vision to other opportunities that were then available. And all this is for if not for recovery. I'll just put that in there. Like, changing that changed a lot. I'm finally open and available to my opportunities. Coming out, I got a really good opportunity. Somebody employed me fresh out of prison. Went into I worked for a banquet company, an event company, and I was just a banquet server, and I was able to make my way up to a banquet manager, and things I've never done before. And this is just confidence building, only because somebody gave me an opportunity. And my goal is to be that person to as many people as I can. It has really brought me to this point where I'm trying to open up new opportunities and I don't understand what's going on in our society. I've been out of society for a very long time, and now that I'm coming into it and meeting other previously incarcerated people coming into life after a long time of not being in life, and it really is it's eye-opening seeing, like, why are things the way they are? Why aren't we giving people a fair shake and a real chance at things? So I really found purpose. I have a purpose-driven life today, thank God. I didn't have that before. Nothing good, at least. So it brings me into this, just, I want to be of service, and whatever I can do for a bunch of those like me that are out still struggling and having these rejections pile up on them. My goal is to see that lesson and see us be re-enfranchised. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Marcel. Dara, I was wondering if you could speak to Repowered's business model and how the passage of the Clean Slate Act will be a positive impact for you and other folks.
Of course. So Repowered is a social enterprise. We're one of very many in the Twin Cities. That's a style of business that's on the rise. Social enterprise means that we are a 501c3 nonprofit, but the majority of our income is supplied by our business practice. So from our income from data destruction, we provide extremely secure data management and destruction practices for primarily businesses that are getting rid of their older IT assets and need to make sure that that precious personal, medical, financial, all other data is very securely handled and destroyed. Then we salvage anything that can be salvaged and refurbished for resale. We primarily resell to other nonprofits. A lot of our stuff goes to schools. A lot of our stuff goes to NGOs in developing nations. So we are where your tech goes to die and be reincarnated. Really, we're also where all your embarrassing photos on your phone go to die. So keep that in mind as well, because we also not just for commercial interests, but for we have a thriving drop off where people bring their old TVs, their smartphones, their tablets, their everything. But that's only a part of our mission, and it's a big part is to make sure that we divert all of the e-waste that comes in, that if it's something that we cannot process ourselves, that it goes to one of our downstream recyclers that's also just as responsible about how those things are dealt with as we are. Nothing gets dumped in a landfill, nothing goes to the incinerator, nothing gets shipped to China, it's all recycled domestically. So when something comes into our facility, a piece of technology, it goes on to a better life, let's say, either as something that's reused or something that's responsibly recycled. But that's only a small portion of our mission. That's what pays the bills, and what really drives the heart of our business is our work readiness program, which is a 12 to 18 month, so much longer than most job skills programs, stabilization and training program for people facing barriers to employment. That barrier is almost always that they are leaving incarceration or have a history of having been incarcerated or having lesser criminal charges due to addiction. There are lots of programs that help with other types of barriers, and this is sort of our niche. And I have the best workers. I honestly, other people in HR ask me, well, isn't it difficult? Like, isn't it hard to deal with people who come in with substance use disorder in their past? Isn't it hard to deal with people who have to check in with a parole officer? Isn't it difficult to deal with people who have curfews, who can't work a quick shift or change quickly without getting permission from their transitional housing? And the answer is it's not hard at all. Those are all things that I had not dealt with before. I hadn't dealt with a workforce with incarceration histories necessarily before. But in the year that I've been at Repowered, I have come to see that the way that a lot of people think about incarceration as something that has happened in a worker's past is that it is an interruption, that it's a pause in their work history. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. People who are incarcerated work while they are incarcerated at a higher rate than the national average. So should look this up this morning. I got the October numbers. I'm a numbers person, but right now our workforce participation for last month, which is trending upwards, is 62.7% of the U.S. population. More than 66% of people who are currently incarcerated are working. So it's not a pause in their work life. It is, for a lot of people, it is the most they have ever consistently worked. Marcel said that he made the most out of prison, and certainly not to cast low light on Marcel's incredible achievements, but he's not the only one. He's certainly not 1 in a million or even 1 in 100. When you look at what people are doing in prison, when you think about that time not as lost time, but as time that people are working and that people are training, then you see people who are developing skills because they're incarcerated, not despite of the fact that they're incarcerated. More than 20% of people who are currently incarcerated are pursuing higher education. Every single one of my workers came in with a high school diploma or a GED. More than 40% of people who are currently incarcerated are waiting to get into a job training program or an educational program. These are people who are hungry to change things about their lives, and they're hungry to add to their skills. And I I have the best workers, frankly. If there weren't so many people with incarceration histories, I'd probably keep it to myself, because I don't want other people to poach my great workforce. But the fact is that, especially with thinking about how the Clean Slate Act is going to change the way that we hire, to change the way that we look at our employment pools. In thinking about these expungements, which, as Mark very handily talked about, were at very low utilization when you have to pursue it yourself, when you have to take time off of work to go to an expungement clinic, then you're losing money, you're losing time from your family, you're losing all these things in order to pursue something that's important, but that you may not necessarily see direct impact from. Having these automatic expungements, having them be something that happens without the necessary investment of time and effort from people who need their records cleared, means that this isn't a question of, will you be hiring people with criminal records? You will. You absolutely will. You probably are right now. The question is, are your policies going to be leading or lagging? We have some time to think about how we want to develop our processes to capture that experience, capture that work experience from incarceration, that education from incarceration. And you don't have to wait until the state of Minnesota passes another law about it to already start thinking about the skills that you want workers to have, the mindsets that you want workers to have, and to think about how incarceration, instead of getting in the way of that, might actually be promoting that in your workforce the way it is mine.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dara. And actually, you're going to lead me right into our next question. So leading into our next question, Mark, I'm going to start with you. I'm wondering if you could give a call to businesses. So what can we as the business community do now to stop this cycle of doing a little bit and then pausing and doing a little bit and pausing, to keep fair chance hiring at the forefront of people's minds and employers' minds? And how can we sort of stop the can from being kicked down the road a little bit?
I actually think Marcel and Derek can probably speak better to this, but as I noted in my intro, I did work on a training program for a while, helping employers understand why this is important. And I think, before the what, like the why to me is, I think that, you already heard about and these employees being more loyal, reliable, just being great employees, having work history. They also, have, like, the U.S. Army did a study where they found that people who had been given a conduct waiver to get in actually advanced more quickly and performed better than others. There's just a lot of potential here that's of benefit to a business. The other thing is, like, this is a huge, by not having blanket policies against hiring people, by looking at each case individually and giving people a chance to, tell you their story and understand what happened and why and where they're at now, you're doing a huge community service. Because if we want to stop the cycles of poverty and marginalization that help to fuel criminal activity, and reduce opportunity and strong economy, like, employers need, this is what how employers can help stop those cycles. We haven't mentioned this, but there's also huge racial disparities in the criminal justice system that feeds into existing inequities, historical racism, all those things that just continues that spiral. So it's just a great opportunity for employers not to just do the right thing, but to do the thing that benefits them. And the way to do that really is individualizing things. I think the challenge comes when you're a bigger employer, or a franchise, or, they have to have uniform policies that have guidelines. But I know that those employers, a number of years ago, the coalition of folks working on Ban the Box, which took the question about criminal records off the initial application. We worked with Target, and Target had already been revising their policies, and a lot of big employers have done this as well. So, I think the first step is ask yourself, what is your policy? How does it impact this? And if it's not giving people an opportunity to be, really evaluated based on where they're at now, then figure out how you can make it do that.
Awesome. Marcel, I'm going to go to you next. What's your call to businesses on how we can stop this cycle?
I talk to businesses all the time in sales meetings, when they need support, and I bring up, what about second chance? There's a lot of notions of liability and risk involved. I really go through it all, and we look at the different charges and, what is the recidivism rate? Because a lot of people have just real deep misconceptions about, what it means to hire somebody with a background and what kind of liability and risk they're taking. Getting them to look at it, and I like to tell them this way. First of all, I didn't catch a felony until I was 38. Horrible employee candidate in my old life. I'll be straight on that one. So there's all that time. I find just in my own employment in the last 5 years of hiring everybody that comes through my doors, I'm maybe, somebody told me a stat that if somebody that's justice impacted has a clean record for 3 years, they're like three times more likely to get an incident from somebody that doesn't have a record than from that person with that record. And I don't know where those stats come from. I'll just let you know that. But I tell them there's two different attitudes in workers today. There's the idea that I can go anywhere and get employment. This wasn't difficult for me. Like, do you know the unemployment rate? I can go anywhere with my good resume and get a job, compared to, I really need this opportunity, and I need to make the best out of this opportunity. I think with real strong vetting and really being realistic on where a worker is, like, do they have stable housing? Do they have stable transportation? Like, being able to put forth the best candidates is really important for all of this. And I think it is for the employers themselves to really look at what has that person done since, and that should really be some of the key information they're looking at. Because if somebody has this colored history and it stops X amount of years ago, that's where, what happened, what changed, what made this drastic change, and that's where Strive is looking to meet up with people, is on that uptake and really learning where they are. Because in 5 years, I've seen people really come in, get an opportunity and run with it and make the best out of their lives. And that's really the outcome we're trying to get, is to see people improve. And the case for business in that is you start to lower your turnover. You start to have people that are, those employees that really add to your culture, that really add to the environment. A lot more loyalty involved at that point. If you give somebody that leg up and that opportunity, you really see a big difference in how they are compared to maybe some other employees. I have really, I'm trying to think, really loyal workers, that are like, hey, it's hard for me to go outside of here and get a job. So yeah, there's a real strong case for it. And I think if you want that loyalty in your work force, that this is a real population to look at. I hope I answered the question there. Sometimes I get
Yes,
a
you
little
did.
tricky.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And
Thank
then
you.
finally, we'll go to Dara. Can you talk a little bit about how to improve fair chance hiring practices?
So I think about this a lot. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to add anything that Marcel can't, from the standpoint of the quality of the workers. So I want to talk a little bit more about a thing of fair chance, not as a favor that you are doing to somebody who might prove themselves to be a good worker who's had a bad background, but as a business decision, to approach it as anything else that you would as a business decision. So what would you look at? You would look at return on investment. What am I getting out of this versus what I'm putting into it? And not just for justice impacted workers, but for my entire organization. Whenever I am recruiting, and I'm a recruiter, whenever I recruit on any positions we have, whether it's a position in our work readiness program or whether it's a staff position, an executive position, anything, I include a statement about our fair chance hiring policy, that we welcome people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, and that's something that enriches all of us. My recruitment budget is nothing. It's zero, because we're an open fair chance employer. People come to me. I have a wait list for for every position. I still have people contacting me about positions that I posted months and months ago. They're high quality candidates. So look at how much you're spending on your recruitment budget. Average recruitment for all roles. I want to say the median from Sherm's survey last year was about $1,500. I didn't spend $1,500 in a single candidate. I didn't spend $1,500 this whole year. So the return on investment is incredible. My turnover is so low. We're light industrial. We're in a high turnover industry, and my 30-day turnover is less than 10%, has been all year. My 90-day turnover is even lower, if you can believe it. It's fantastic return on investment as far as that goes, but also make it data based, right? What is the recidivism rate? What are the skills that are actually needed for this job? What are the risks that are actually associated with this position? And rather than thinking of having a criminal record as being a blanket risk, or a blanket set of skills that someone doesn't have because they've been out of the workforce. I'd recommend that all companies look at all of the skills that are going to be needed, and to be clear that they are open to hearing about those skills that were acquired while someone was working during incarceration. Candidates tend to leave it off of their resumes when they apply because they don't want to talk about their incarceration. They think that's going to lose them the job. If you make very clear from the beginning that that's not something that is going to disqualify them from consideration, then you start hearing better information from the candidates that you do get. So it really boosts all initiatives for hiring. Diversity, equity, inclusion is one of your goals to hire more veterans. Well, 1 in 3 veterans has been incarcerated. That's something to think about. We don't tend to think of those as overlapping groups, but they absolutely are. Is one of your goals to hire more people of color? Well, 1 in 4 people of color of working age in Minnesota, just in Minnesota, has a felony conviction in their record. So if you want your workforce to more accurately reflect the people who you have as your client base, it might be time to look at whether or not a felony conviction is something that should be exclusionary to hiring somebody. So all I can say is run the numbers. Approach it with a data mind and getting the best information that you can. And I think you'll find what I found, which is that being a fair chance employer is just a good business decision.
Great, thank you so much. Mark, I want to go back to you really quickly. And I know that employers, we've talked a lot about today, liability and sort of the concern that employers may have with hiring formerly incarcerated individuals. So what's one piece of advice that you could give to employers around conforming to these new laws, helping maybe advocate for more provisions to come out, things like that? What do you think that businesses could be doing in more of the legal side of all of this?
Excuse me, sure. So first of all, as I mentioned in the new law, like this is a great step forward for a lot of people, but there are so many people that this is not going to apply to. So I just implore people to please do not think that, now you can just hire people who have a record expunged, because that's not going to include so many people that, meet the qualifications we've been talking about. Outside of that, on the liability side, I really do think that the statute we have now for liability protection is pretty strong. When we passed it in 2009, I know it was the strongest in the country. And what it really says is if you're hiring somebody for your typical employment, if they're doing things that they, probably would be doing just by virtue of being out in the community anyways, you're fine. Like, and if for those positions, you could hire somebody with, whatever pass. I know there's other things employers consider, but the liability is really, really narrow. So I wouldn't, be too concerned about that. As far as, advocating for legal changes, Marcel mentioned one, that I don't know if business folks would want to get on board with this, but I would think it would be, there's reasons that they would, and that's to just limit, we could have a law that limits what records an employer can consider at all. California has a law like this. It's similar to in credit reporting. Credit reporting companies can only go back so far. California has a similar law for criminal records. If you're legally prohibited from using it, then you just can't use it, and that you've got the liability protection there as well. I think definitely getting involved with like the chamber, and again, the chamber has been a great partner and supporter on this kind of thing. That's very helpful to work with them as they consider other options in the future. But really, the main thing is just your own practice, and then speaking with your colleagues and other businesses to make sure that they're having practices that provide the most opportunity possible.
Thank you. Dara, I'm wondering if you could speak to maybe one or two ways that would be really efficient for businesses in expanding their talent pools. I know that you mentioned that a little bit earlier, and I was wondering if you could just expand a little on that and how this new legislation will help employers do that, or some easy ways they could be doing that.
Easy ways would be to strongly recommend kind of the one of the real leaders in providing information about and connecting people up with new labor forces, and that's honestly we can't consider people who've been incarcerated as a new labor force since they have been working the whole time, but they don't need to be reintroduced to work. They need to be reintroduced to the workforce for private employers. But I strongly recommend, if you're not already connected up with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED. DEED has a number of initiatives for new Americans, connecting them with work, for specifically for people who are facing barriers due to passive incarceration. DEED has amazing informational programming and connecting to local job centers and things like that, and letting them know I am interested in candidates who may have a justice impacted background. I'd strongly recommend taking a look at your everybody's got one, your file full of job descriptions that you kind of are cutting and pasting and putting up on job boards as you need to recruit, and really going through those and saying, what are the requirements, right? Do I really need it? As we've seen just this month, do we really need a college degree for this? Is that required, or do we need these 5 skills that somebody with a college degree generally has, but it's not exclusive? Do we have a statement when we're posting to job boards that we are fair chance, or that we will consider people with criminal backgrounds? Honestly, just including some language like that is usually enough to expand your talent pool, because it gives a clear signal that you're willing to consider skills over background. So honestly, I'd say just do a little housekeeping, a little education, a little housekeeping. That's something that you can do right now to expand your pool of qualified candidates. Right? It's not just about getting more people applying; it's about getting more people with the right skills applying, saving you time and money. And what Clean Slate will help do is help people know what's going to come up when they do apply to jobs, right? When they do get that, past that interview, to the conditional offer, they'll have an idea, instead of sitting there waiting and sweating out, what are they going to find about me? What Clean Slate will do will give people a lot more clarity when they're applying to jobs, as far as what in my record do I want to think about disclosing? How do I talk about this? But just having that certainty for workers when they're applying to jobs, I think is going to increase their confidence when they're applying, when they're interviewing, which is a great way to start a conversation with somebody to really know what skills they have and what interests they have, and to see if they're a good fit for you or not.
Hannah, could I chime in something quick, just piggybacking off what Sarah just said, regarding people who receiving an expungement or thinking they've received an expungement. One thing for employers to know is that it can be pretty confusing for people, like what records were sealed and what weren't, and how long it takes. And so you may come across somebody who just thinks they don't have to disclose it, and then it comes up. So I think, I know in the past, people, employers would often, say or do, this is what they would do, that if you disclose it, you were fine, or you can consider it. But if somebody, doesn't disclose it, then you're not considered at all. Please, that's just not a good policy, because it can be really confusing. I encourage people, if that happens, just to call, notify the person you found this, and see how they react, what they tell you about, what happened and why. And it's very possible they could have thought it was expunged, but for some reason it didn't get it. It's not a perfect system by any means. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Finally, as we're wrapping up here, Marcel, I just wanted to ask you really quickly if you would be able to share a couple of maybe green flags that you see in employers that you're talking to who are looking to expand their talent pools, and maybe what are some positive things that you've experienced and hope to see more of in the future.
So, there's a couple companies that have abolished background checks altogether. Very interesting meeting with them. I'll shout out Mortensen. They abolished background checks, and the person that they have been that kind of led this is they're really forward thinking. Can the person do the job? Do they have the experience they need to be able to do this position? And I think that's great. I think that needs to expand. Just the idea of workers for workers, not for what they did. I work with another company in town here that our conversation started on Second Chance. They wanted to step into this space and find certain skilled workers with backgrounds. They're very open to backgrounds, but then and to see how eager they were to really move into this, because they had an experience that worked out for them, and they're like, okay, well, we can look at more of this. It's just finding, sometimes there's particular skills, more skilled positions, and those are less available in this background. Like I find a lot more ease of movement into entry level, but when I start looking at cabinet makers and even though MinCore does have cabinet makers, so trust me, I'm looking for that, but only three graduates of that program have their resumes with MNCOR on them in Indeed. I talk to a lot of employers that are open to this, but they don't want to advertise it. They don't want to be that felon-friendly place. They want to kind of move into it quietly and be a little bit more, which, hey, I'm open to that too. It's wherever we can get started is the main thing. I'm a gigantic fan of Repowered. I think that they are a proof of concept, going from 24% retention to over 80% retention, just in kind of changing how they do things from HR people to more of a caseworker type concept. There's room to really bring this population in. If a company wants to say, hey, we want to up our support of our employees, really that's where they'll see a big change and go from that more corporate, you're just a number and productivity to, the holistic view of we want to be supportive and offer that support to our employees, which I think is a big part of this. Is there's a lot of different nonprofits and that are set up to support the reentry and employment of our fellow, community members coming back into society. And I think that if they can be kind of that support during that first year of employment for a lot of these people and help get rid of those barriers, like I can't say it enough, Repowered's way of barrier disillusion set up in the first 90 days and different, like it's amazing. I can't believe that they can even keep employees. They should have companies coming to them saying, hey, we want what you guys, the product of what you guys have. I think it can be replicated into different industries even and have that kind of a success of 80+% retention. What a great concept. Any company who puts this kind of idea into action is really going to see that small investment on the front end is going to pay off big on the back end.
Great. Thank you so much. As we wrap up, I want to just be mindful of everybody's time. I know that you three have taken time out of your day to be here, and I really want to thank you all for being here, for participating on your experience and how the Clean Slate Act will help move us forward. The Chamber is very supportive of this, and we're so excited you were all able to be here today. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up for the day, and everybody have a great rest of your election day. And we'll talk about this. I'm sure we'll be seeing more about Clean Slate Act in the future.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.